Already, good morning, especially to our viewers online, the US, around the country. We are being watched live on Facebook and Zoom. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for gracing this occasion with your presence. Welcome, everyone, to our pride, Steve Biko Center. We are happy to be hosting and celebrating this very, I won't say special day. It was a sad day that time on the 19th of October, 1977. We even called it as a country a Black Wednesday. It was this day that the country was in the darkness, where our media houses were shut down. Those were our eyes to the world. People who reported the plight of South Africa to the world were shut down by the regime. Our Black consciousness leaders were banned and detained. Our newspaper houses were closed down. We can quote The World and The Weekend World, where we saw our editor, then Percy Qoboza, being detained live. We are here to celebrate that day, where we are honoring and paying tribute to Professor Bennie Khoapa, who was one of the key people behind the Black consciousness and Black community development in the country. We're fortunate as Ginsberg to have our own Steve Biko working under him. Imagine someone who was supervising Steve Biko. That's how big the prof was. And we are here today to celebrate his life. Sadly, he passed away in May. He could not be with us today. But if he was still alive, he would have been here, I'm sure. But he is here represented by his daughter. So we can safely say he's here. His spirit is around us. And we are here celebrating this day. We have our heroes for that day, or during those times of Black consciousness, leaders were detained. But as we go on, we are going to be mentioning their names and honoring themselves and the roles that they are played. But when I want to welcome our senior citizens from Kingdomstown who are here with us. We came to make sure that when you're being watched live, they are here to bless this occasion with their presence here. My name is Nobuto Betcheni from Ginsberg, born and bred here. I grew up hearing this name of Steve Biko and Black consciousness. I proudly introduce myself as someone from Ginsberg. I don't need to mention it as my town. A friend of mine always said, people of Ginsberg, why are you always just saying I'm from Ginsberg and nothing behind? It's how proud we are of Ginsberg. And we are here today celebrating and paying tribute to the life of Prof Khoapa. Today with me, we're having Sam online, Miss Sam Modley. I don't want to do injustice to her, but just a brief introduction. She's going to introduce herself and her work and her connections to the prof. But she was a research assistant for the BCP, working with Steve Biko. Our Steve Biko was a researcher. She was assistant researcher, and I'm a researcher as well. I'm a statistician by profession, so I just want to connect myself in any way that is possible to use them. Sam was a research assistant at that time, but doing a great work, collecting data. You know how research is important when you collect data about community development and the plight of our communities so that they could plan properly on the programs to implement on those days. I'm with Dr. M-Afrika, Andile M-Afrika, Doc from Ginsberg as well, who's a director and the founder of Africa Research Institute that is seeking to tell these stories that we don't even get to hear them in our curriculum, in our schools. We are going, thank you, Doc, for this it is going to help a lot our communities, and it will start here in Getsbeek. I see from the few that are here, they will tell others, and they know that there is an institute like this that will tell these stories, so they should come more to such events. We have Mamsi Khoapa, the daughter of the late Prof Bennie Khoapa that we are honoring today. Thank you for coming, for gracing. We have family Khoapa that is also watching online, and other family members are in the US, and we also have friends of Prof who are also watching online. So welcome to everyone. Welcome to the kids who are here. Take this very seriously. I know you came as a helping hand, but you are the leaders of tomorrow. So we hope that it is a mark that will be left by this dialogue that we're going to have today. If I will hand over to Sam. It's been a while, you've been waiting there, idling online. Over to you, can you introduce yourself and then carry on with your talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nambuto. It's wonderful to be with you today. And I'm so proud to know that we are dedicating this, the 19th of October, to Ben Khoapa. Organizations were banned by the nationalist government of South Africa. I've been honored to engage with you to remember Professor Ben Khoapa, who was the founder of Black community programs in Durban and was one of the organizations that was banned. And of course, Ben was the patron of the Steve Biko Center, which was established in 2012. Thank you, Andile, for giving me the opportunity to share the platform with you and with Mamsi, Ben's daughter, today. I'd like to start and like to read out a poem I dedicated to Ben that was read out at his memorial in Matatiele on the 15th of May, 2024. It reads, donned in a black Cossack hat and long black trench coat, a formidable figure, you stood amongst us, and we listened to you in awe. You created a lasting impression from the first time we met at UNB. Ben, you then brought to life boardroom meetings with people like Ndamse, Madladla Mpashlele, Griffith Mxenge, Nyambezi, Bengu, Justice Poswa, Don Kali. And then day after day, your doors were open to these youngsters, you called them, from Claremont, Umlazi, Chesterville, KwaMashu. You inspired us through discussion and debate into the wee hours of the morning. Such lofty thoughts, from theology to liberation, liberation to self, to liberation of society. With quiet passion, you engendered deep insights into community. Cross-legged, pointer finger to pressed lips, creased brow, pensively you thought through views opposed to Black consciousness philosophy. But nothing swayed your belief from the truth, speaking truth to the powers that steadfastly, a pillar sturdy and strong. And we leaned on you. Strong and sturdy you stood, fighting for our liberation from a colonized humanity. May your spirit live on. Andile, your topic today reads 30 years of democracy, the cost of inferiority complex. But I will focus rather on the cost of being, of or not being. I think I'm just being Shakespearean, okay? A journey we can reflect on with Ben through the lived experiences of Black consciousness. When I first met Ben, he was very involved with the churches. So he sent us to listen to Reverend Ernest Bartman at a Methodist conference on the significance of the development of Black consciousness in the churches. It was in Aliwal Street in Durban. And he said, listen carefully, and you will learn about what it is to be or not to be. Reverend Bartman's words still ring in my mind. And I'd like to quote what he said. He said, BC is the former Hottentot, Coolie, non-European, Bantu, non-white, saying loudly no to these names, no to the boss, the master, the Europeans, and the white. It is the Black man saying no to white racism in all its forms and oppressive and paternalistic ways. It is the Black man saying no to the arrogance of liberals and progressives. No more is he going to try to fit in. No more is he going to say what the white man wants to hear and thus continuing his own indignity. No more does the white man epitomize all that is good, just, and of value. No more is a white man the Black man's yardstick to humanity. End quote. This was no Shakespeare, I thought. In fact, it was where the journey began for us. Our journey of being in our search for our humanity, determined by ourselves and for ourselves. We're not going to be named in negative terms. We took upon ourselves the right to be who we thought we were, and that was being Black, not colored, not Indian, not African, as registered and classified by the nationalist government. We took on this mantle with pride and wore it with dignity, weaving ourselves together in unity and solidarity of a people who were socially, economically, and politically oppressed. This was how the definition of Black came into being. Black had nothing to do with the pigmentation or the color of our skin. We wanted to be self-defined and not defined by others. And to quote Steve on identity, he said, I'm going to be me as I am. And you can beat me or jail me or even kill me, but I'm not going to be what you want me to be. How painfully ironic that was. And we realized that the power resided in ourselves. Black meant that it was going to be a mental attitude and nothing else. So what were the lessons we can learn from our past histories? When we look back at some of those exclusionary practices, it showed how we were inferiorized and inadvertently began to internalize our inferior status. We began to feel we were not capable, less than. We waited for handouts that kept us in indebtedness. But thanks to the Black consciousness philosophy, we began to reflect on ourselves, and through the processes of introspection, we began to redefine, reappraise, and re-envision our lives in a capitalist, racist, exploitative South Africa we lived in. It would be great if we did that again. It is so important that we start that process of redefinition. It could be differently today. In our redefinition, of course, came a reclamation of a dignity to one's identity, which also meant regaining our humanity. Being human also meant searching for indigenous values, which values today seem to have faded away from our consciousness. I remember Ben talking about the value of being proud. And I want to quote what Ben said. He said, "Pride cannot be equated to arrogance or selfishness, self-centeredness, or egoism. Likewise, there is no place for individualism, competition at the expense of the other." And this stands out very clearly for me. Pride is regaining one's self-esteem and self-worth by listing oneself and others in communities that you come from. The end quote. So really, when you think about what he said, don't you think that it's time for reflection on the cost of what we have become today against the society we'd like to envision or revision for tomorrow? It was always Ben's belief that in working with communities, we should first begin at home, with our families. And this reminds me of the story told to me by the children of Vui Mashalaba. Vui Mashalaba is Steve Biko's cousin and the first general secretary of SASO in 1970-71. And Vui's story is in a book I compiled called Time to Remember, Reflections of Women from the Black Consciousness Movement. And her children talked about the lessons their mother taught them and how their mother held their future and hearts in her hands. To them, they said, to quote, her palm was unconditional love. Her thumb was resilience in the face of struggle. Her index finger was compassion for others. Her middle finger sought the power to fulfill one's vision for the future. The ring finger symbolized celebration of self and others. And the pinky finger was raised in honor of respect for self and the others. End quote. And then I say that if we place all our fingers together and raise them high, it spells out the power of solidarity. And it was this power of solidarity amongst the 19 organizations that instilled fear in the regime of that time and resulted in the bannings of the organizations. Now, talking about solidarity, it saddened Ben to see how fragmented we had become, and even more so today, I think. The call for one nation, one Azania, seems such a distant cry. The perpetuation of a racialized country has further fragmented us, resulting in fear, mistrust, and suspicion. The racial propaganda of the past is so deeply embedded in us psychologically that today we have become silent colluders of past oppressive behaviors and attitudes. But really, if we can honor the teachings of Black consciousness, let's honor the fact that there can only be one race, and that is the human race. That is what the 19 organizations were banned for. Banned because of inculcating the values of being human, of being more humane. But more than that, they were banned because through the mushrooming of community education programs, people began to understand the reasons for their oppression. Ben would say, and I quote, if people thought less about their oppression, then the more tolerance for it will grow. And after a while, they will think that oppression is the normal state of affairs, end quote. And of course, this tied up with what Steve talked about, that the most effective weapon of oppression is in the hands of the oppressor, is the mind of the oppressed. The 19 Black organizations would not let this happen because they believed in the words of Wangari Maathai. And Wangari Maathai said, you cannot enslave a mind that knows itself, that values itself, that understands itself. And that was what it was all about. And that is how the work of Black community programs under Ben Khoapa's directorship engaged communities to reflect on their actions, to become self-reliant, strive to become less dependent and more economically self-sufficient. I know there is one course of action you can take in remembrance of today's event, and in memory of Ben. And in this event that symbolizes the reason behind the banning of the 19 Black consciousness organizations. And I say that is, you must break the internalized oppression of silence. Pledge to become active participants in communities you come from. Now, wherever you are, at the Biko Center or in the chat room, I think you can still become involved. So please just write down and think about what you are going to be doing. Write down a list of organizations in your community. Decide which one you would like to belong to. What would you want? Why would you want to join these organizations? How would you mobilize others to belong to the organizations? And what would be the program of action? Now, this is what exactly Ben schooled us to believe in, that we belong. And I think every one of us here today belongs in the communities that we strove to build. But really, at the end, you've got to let the communities take back the power that belongs to them. And I'm asking of you to be the reason for the change the community has been waiting for. And when you have completed the task with them, let the people know that they themselves have been responsible for it. It was part of a philosophy that we believed in our action when we went into Black community programs. I hope this gives you food for thought, and I want to say thank you very much for having me on the program. Thank you, Nabuto.
Thank you very much for those words. They are really inspiring to us and encouraging, especially on the community development work that has seemed to be a little bit not taken seriously these days, but we have seen the effect of that work in 1977, which it is what brought us here, actually. We are here to celebrate a leader of that program that was taking place within our communities, especially Black communities. Thank you very much, Sam. We have audience here. Anyone on, before Sam is not going to be with us for long. She has to go somewhere. And until how long, what time are we here, Sam? Maybe later you can be able to respond if there's anything. Okay.
Andile has spoken, maybe?
All right, that would be nice. Then we can take comments then. Thank you very much. And this, what Sam was talking on now, especially the highlight of community programs, that she was part of them. It brings us to acknowledging our audience here, because when I see them, I see the community programs that have been taking place, and now we as young people, we are not following their footsteps. We are graced here by the presence of our elders, I said earlier on, from the area, from Ginsberg. We have families here that are represented, led by Mama Wetu, Mama Steve Biko, Mandlof. She's here with us, gracing this occasion. And Mama Bisholo, next to her, from Ginsberg. And Mama Smanga. She's looking at me thinking, I wonder if she knows my study. You see? Mama no Tatu Mpondo. We have there this pro as well. Mama Mango is here to bless. Mr. Mango highlighted Uzwai to be coming because he was a colleague, a prof at Forte. Prof worked at Forte, Prof worked in KZN, he was quite part of the merging of the universities, the University Technical Natal to KZN. He worked there. There were people when we were advertising this event that they had good things to say about him, who remembered him during those times in Forte and in KZN, in those institutions. We also have people that in between the speakers that we are going to be paying tribute to and honoring them. Those most of them have passed on, and we are happy that their work is still here. We can see the work and we talk about it. Prof worked with the likes of Peter Cyril Jones in the Black Community programs. As he was the head, he worked with Dr. Sipho Nyembezi. He worked with Dr. Ntato Motlada, who was the vice chairperson of BCP. Tlaku Rachidi, we remember him. The guy was wearing that beautiful regalia during the funeral of Steve Biko with a black polo neck. I like that photo of himself. I got lucky to meet him in Johannesburg the other day, and he had aged then before he passed on. But I reminded him of that polo neck and that regalia he was wearing. He worked with the likes of advocates Chris Mokotutua, the first vice president of BPC, Mrs. Sali Motlana, who was the former member of ANC Youth Congress and a mentor of the BC generation and a social worker by profession, and the first president of Black Women's Federation. We also remember on this day Dr. Biko, a brother to Steve Biko, who participated in the activities of the BCP, sometimes sending in for his bent brother, as you all know that. By that time, most of the time, Steve Biko was bent at home. So Kaya would go there and stand in for himself. So at some stage, Kaya would sign BCP checks on the instructions of his brother, such as the time when he had to pay bail money for students from Ginsberg who were detained. So we honor those people who are no longer with us that also worked with Prof those times of the BCP. Now we're going to be handing over to Mamsi. Is it you or we want to start? Mamsi is the daughter of Prof. She's going to share some light with us and would love to hear. She shared some stories when we came here about the life they lived. She even said she doesn't know what other kids were told, because these were the conversations that she would hear from home. So she's not sure if maybe they were told things ahead of their time. They were still young to hear such things. But she's here to represent her father. Over to you, ma'am. You will introduce yourself.
Good morning. Still morning, right? Was this afternoon now? No, thank you so much for this opportunity. But before I start, I want to do a disclaimer because my other sister said, Mamsi, when you're at DUT, I'm sure people think Udedi was busy giving us alcohol to be drunk. So I want to clear that up. What I meant by that is, his biggest thing was he always wanted us to experience life through him. And what that was, he wanted us to taste alcohol. You know, all these things that are forbidden out there, but form part of our culture and our society. He wanted us to experience it from him, so he would make us taste a little bit of alcohol for taste, to say, do you like this? Do you like this? Do you know how it's made? So that alcohol did not become this forbidden thing that most students do in their first year of university, where they drink until they are stupid, because it's like freedom and all those things. So that's the person that who he was. So I think I'm also just tying it up to what Sam Woodley was talking about. It's about the being. If we don't honor the being, you get lost. And all of those things resonate with me because I remember when I came back from the US, and I made the mistake of saying to my dad, I didn't vote. Whoa. And he was like startled. He was like, oh, why didn't you vote? And in my mind, I was calculating, because you didn't start a conversation with my dad if you didn't have a conclusion. Because it would be 2 hours later, you are still talking about that. Because he wanted to understand why you do something. He was really a social practitioner. So when people talk about, I think right now we always talk about leaders, and we define leaders as based on title. We define leaders as money. We define leaders as who your friend is, what you dress like. So all of the things that we're using to define leadership, it's not really the essence of the soul. Those are not the things that keep you in place. Those are not the things people will remember you for. People will remember you by how you treated each other. People will remember you by how you treated your parents. What role you played in your community. Did it matter? And so if we don't honor that part, in nice language, people talk about self-determination. They talk about self-reliance, self. Yes, self is important because self is your root. But if your self is detrimental to your community, if your self is less than, and what I mean about that is your mind, if you're not using your mind to define yourself as well as your roots, you are a person without grounding. You're shifting. Any philosophy that gets thrown at you is going to stick. But the biggest lessons that I've always learned from my dad, first and foremost, love for self. Secondly, there is no controversy you cannot delve into. And just because I don't agree with you, it doesn't mean you are less than. It doesn't mean we're an enemy. And those are the things I find very lacking in our society right now. It's almost like you have to agree with me all the time in order for you to be my friend or in order for me to get that job. And as a result, we are losing that diversity of views. The BC movement, for me, it's the consciousness part of it. It allowed people of different ilk to actually come together. There were you call coloreds. There were white people. There were, the biggest donors for the BC were mostly white people from overseas who had never been to South Africa, but they would make the journey just to come and meet Ben Khoapa. And then from Ben Khoapa, they'll say, okay, where does Steve live? They'll discover that, oh, he's on the other side. They will do some very funny maneuvering just to get to Kingsburg. They will do some funny maneuvering to get to Umlazi. Remember, in those times, they were not allowed to be at Umlazi because of their race. But it was that important to them to meet them in person, because it was a gravitating towards humanity. It was gravitating towards being of relevance to the communities that people lived in. So if nothing else, if we can remember those things, because for me, those are the values that I will always remember my father by. It's the values that have made me a human being. And by being a human being, it means I can be of value to someone else. I always have to make sure that I respect my parents, because without them, I am nothing. I'm not talking about DNA here. I'm talking about my parents. And as you all are sitting there, you are my parents. If I don't honor you, it doesn't matter what my last name is, what my surname is. I am not honoring you as my parents. All of this strife we're talking about, the elderly being victimized by violence, I mean, that's uncalled for, which means we are losing who we are. And I'm not talking about a race, I'm talking about we are losing who we are. And if we can honor those type of things, I think my father, I think Uncle Steve, I think all of those who have gone ahead to clear a path for us will be honored if we do right by them. But it starts with us and it ends with us. And I was talking to Dr. Andile this morning, and I was trying to define 30 years later, what do I feel Black Wednesday means to me 30 years later. There's a sadness in me because I think we have lost the adultness in us. We have decided to crawl back into infancy. And that is a very sad state of affairs when you think of what they had to put in place out of nothing. We are now, and I'm talking about my generation and those who come after me, we are recipients of their hard work, their blood, sweat, and tears, their deaths, to be honest. But we have allowed ourselves to be complacent. We are allowing ourselves to expect someone else to do. I can sit here and say, government, the inflation is high. Yeah, government can do certain things to a certain point. Public policy, that's public policy. But what are you doing to lift yourself up? As Sam was saying, what role are you playing in your community to honor your own community? I look at how whenever there's a protest, people toy and they burn schools. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, won't you need the school tomorrow? We burn tires on the road and we destroy the infrastructure. And then 6 months later, we are going to say, government, oh, government, we don't have this, we don't have this. And I'm trying to figure out, are we connecting the dots? We are doing our own destruction. No one else. It's no longer their government. It's us. So if we litter, and I'm going to apologize in advance, nothing drives me mad than litter. Lord have mercy on my soul. This is for family audience, right? Why are we littering? Is that our brand? You see litter, I see black people? I mean, really, is that it? And I'm trying to remember when I was a kid, we had campus care. We had to go pick up garbage around the school and within the perimeter of what the school is. Dig a hole, guys, dig a hole. So you throw it in. And we were kids. This is like lower primary school. I'm not talking about high school or college. Lower primary schools. So it's those things that you are taught as a child. It's not being used as a laborer, but it is teaching you something. It is teaching you cleanliness. It's teaching you self-pride. It's teaching you understanding that you are your community. If my school is dirty, then what am I expecting outside? It translates to how I view myself. It translates to how I carry myself. And those have nothing to do with privilege of money, but just you being. You burn the litter. They used to be, I think they used to revolve. Every other week, a different class will be responsible for picking up litter. Burn it, guess what? It becomes compost. Now we run around talking about sustainability. The practice from way back when, that was normal. We did. Now, you see litter all over the place. And I'm not going to blame the plastic bags because they could have been burned. But those are the things that you cannot have litter around you and then you're going to have a clear mind. You're going to be a visionary. You're going to be this, you're going to be that. You become what you think is normal. I want us to normalize the values that help us move forward. We need to move the needle forward, not backwards. We need to say, what can we do for government, not the other way around? Because remember, government, it's our tax money. So if we are not being responsible about how this money is going to be spent, how are we building our communities? How are we going to take it forward? How are we going to honor all of those names you just mentioned? Because they did their part. What is our role? The elders in the room, they've done their part. They are living ancestors in front of us. How then do we honor them while they are still alive? I think in the US, they like talking about giving them their flowers while they're still alive. Let's do that. But it begins with us being conscious of everything that we do. Because what I do impacts you. Physics, action, reaction. But then you cannot fold your hands later on and say, I just don't know what happened. This community used to be so nice 25 years ago. That community was made of us. So we need to pay it forward. And if we do that, we honor not only the philosophers that have come before us, we honor the implementers. And I was saying upstairs, the relationship I appreciated, and I think I appreciated more as an adult, between Uncle Steve and my dad was that. Uncle Steve was the charismatic talker and thinker, but he knew after he has thought it out, and him and his, I'm going to call them his people, because there was an age difference between Uncle Steve and my dad, almost 10 years. So a decade between two people, really, there's a difference of how you view yourself, right? But he knew what he can come to my dad with and say, this is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm writing. So all those I write what I like kind of things, he used to bounce them off after he has written them. Like he might write them with maybe Badibijani or whatever the case may be, but he'll come back to my dad and say, but how do I make this work? It's a philosophy. Yeah, I can write all you want about the face of Black people is going to be our face of humanity. But now how do I translate that into programs? How do you translate a philosophical aspect and make it a livable aspect? And that's where their balances were. My dad was a social worker by training, so he understood social practice. He actually nurtured that, and I think he got that from his father, who was a chief, of how do you lift off and leverage your communities so that they get access to basic services. But over and above that, how do you go about engaging them to be part of the solution instead of the other way around? So they did that dance up until the day he died. I mean, they would argue every day at 10 a.m. on phone calls that the government never knew they had. But those were the things that made them work. First, it was the respect. It was the trust that was unshakable. It was the knowing that they each had a role to play, and they respected each other's role, but also at the same time, they allowed each other to have that freedom. Because my dad will come back and say, okay, we have the funding for that idea. How will you make it work in Ginsberg? Go talk to your staff. and see if it will work. And get the right people, not your friends, the right people. That's the other thing. You have to be the right person at the right time to do the work. I might have the last name Khoapa, but it doesn't mean it's a magic surname. I have to apply myself to do what I need to do in my profession, whatever your profession is. Your name can only take you so far. It might open the door, but what makes the door continue to open? It's what you do once you're inside. I had to grow up much quicker than most kids. I think my other sister probably grew up quicker than I did, and we only have 13 months in between. She was the one who was there. She actually saw the entire, on the 19th of October. She never slept, so she remembers vividly when they came and ransacked the house and did all of those things. I was sleeping. The only thing I remember in the morning when we got to school, because our school, you had a view of the church, the UCC church where they ran the program. There were just cars all over the place. And only that evening did we know that something major had happened. Up until that point, my sister kept saying, "You guys sleep through anything. You guys sleep through anything. You didn't hear this, you didn't hear that?" I'm like, nope, I didn't hear any of those things. But so she has that in her memory banks of the trauma, all of those things that took place there. But do we allow our traumas to make us victims all of our lives? Or do we use some of those as determinants to say, I want to leave a better footprint than the one that I saw being given to other people? So it's about the being. I'm going back to Sam's message. The being is important. We are beings. It's not a mistake that you were born to the parents you were born to. It's not a mistake you were born in the community that you were born to. The question is, what do you do about this? Do you honor it? Do you add value to it? Do you take it forward? And do you do it with a kind heart? Because also kindness is key, guys. Kindness is key. Community is built on that, and those are the legacies that my father has left me with, and also the ability to argue any point. Doesn't matter what it is. I might totally disagree at the end, but he always watched your mind. Can you defend what you're saying? So if I said I didn't vote, I had to defend why I didn't vote. And he was not going to let me go. We stayed at that sofa for 3 hours. He wanted to know which part made you did not vote. And the conclusion to him, I said, because there's nobody I believe in. That was the saddest moment for him as a parent, because he felt like the leadership had failed. And I said to him, no, Daddy, the leadership has not failed. And he said, why? I said, for me, because you are the leadership to me. So you have not failed. It's those people that are out there that I don't understand what they're talking about. So no, leadership has not failed. The leadership that we see, those are someone's parents. Those are someone's sons, daughters, or whatever the case may be. And my question is always, when they do whatever they do, are they thinking about the role of their leadership to their families? Forget the rest of us, to their families, because they are watching, they are learning from them. So if nothing else, I wish I could duplicate my father to everybody, because he was a grand person. He still is a grand person. Uncle Steve, with his laughter, yeah. He became an uncle in the space of my DNA, my father's brothers. They were mostly not there. Those became our uncles. Those are the people we saw on a daily basis, or we saw at any given moment. They are the footprints of our lives, not so much my biological uncles. And for that, I don't feel like I've lost anything. And my brother, the same thing. They'll probably tell you the same thing. So we honor them because they allowed us into their hearts, into their families, in whatever shape or form. So, Ansiki, I want to say thank you. Thank you for the legacy. Thank you for Uncle Steve being my dad's confidant. And thank you for holding it down for all of these years. Thank you, Andile, for the privilege of being here. And I hope I said something that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mams. Now I'm listening to the story, the first one of the booth. And I'm thinking it has to be somewhere far away from a lot of things. I can imagine living here in Ginsberg, trying my son to drive booths. But thank you for those. And I'm taking exactly what Sam said about it being a trustworthy being a good being that will lead us to be good leaders to what we do, especially going back to the community development. What can we do as beings to ensure that we assist the government in the work they do? We remember again Dr. Msauli, Dr. Sialo Solombela, the late, who were doctors at Zanimpilo, the doctors at Zanimpilo Health Center. And we honor you, Sam, if you are still there online. We honor you, Sam Motley, for being that great person and the great work that you did. We honor Mapetla Mohapi, who was the former secretary of SASO. We honor Nokuzola Magida, who was, I think she's watching. She's the one who was coming to the talk. Yeah, and then we honor, she worked in the Zimele Trust. We also honor Uri Magida, who was also part of BBC. And I also honor and pay tribute to our Otatabit Tubala Ginsberg. We're part of that. Tatu Fesle Mabomba. We honor Himom Kokwa, the late. We honor Tatu Nzengu. Tatu Nzengu is still alive. And when I talk of Mr. Nzengu, I cannot help to bring myself to talk about the church, Anglican church that played a big role all those times. And if you see these projects here on the wall, this is the office in Leopold Street that was used, and it was part of the church. And you see there in Joaquin, the second frame there, you even see on the board there, it's written St. Augustine, that was part of the church. There is Zanimpilo. Those are the projects that the Prof worked on. There's Zanimpilo on the third frame. Zanimpilo still looks like that even today. It has not changed much. But sadly, the fourth frame just shows how the second frame, the Njoaka factory, that generated income for those programs. This has taught us that this is how, those are the remainings of that building. It's a very sad picture that something was started to generate income so that we are not beggars. We don't always ask from Europe and the US for funds. We generated our income. We wanted to make sure, and I'm told that when that day came and everything was raided on the 19th of October, there was a new machine that had just arrived that was going to produce more than 50 pairs of shoes at a time. So it was such a great loss. And to Mamsi earlier when we were talking, she mentioned that she has always wondered, as we were, what is this word, when people are given their land back, if you don't get your land back, Elsa's probably know more about this program, of the land, that then you get the value of the land. The families are given back money. But what about such projects? Their value to this day. So those organizations, can they get their factory back to ensure that we continue working and not always asking for help? So as we honor those, we honor Chapi Palweni, former doctor at Zanimpilo, and the founder of SASU. We honor them both dead and alive, so to make sure that our children remember, we were told that there's a class watching us live in KHS and Dale. Some of the matriculants had to connect live because the topic, anything that has to do with those programs that were led by our Steve Biko. When you talk of the honoring, in Ginsberg we grew up honoring when you talk about taking the good of what we used to do in the olden days, there were bad things, but they were good, like littering, you just mentioned. And there was good for us honoring Steve Biko every 12th of September. And I was told by a friend of mine that her son, that is based in Pretoria, they had a project of Steve Biko. He aced it, got 100% because he comes home for holidays. So he even had a picture of himself next to Biko's center. So he was saying, no, this is nothing to be at home. We talk about this every day. So this is how we can encourage in our little corners, celebrate our people. We don't have to be Prof Bennie Khoapa to be celebrated. You might have done very little in your area that we have to celebrate, and that has made an impact on the communities around you. So as I introduce Doc to come, he will introduce himself. He's a co-founder, he's a founder, the sole founder of M-Afrika Research Institute. Those are his books there, that he's an author as well. He writes books, he collects the work of Steve Biko. For those who are online, if you need a book, you can just Google him, on the email is there, Africa Research Institute. Then you'll find his details and can order the book. It tells many stories. I like the first book he wrote where he did not write anything himself. He just told us stories of people who interacted with Steve Biko. We could hear from simple people, not from the media, not from TV. Simple people would say, I drank with him, I had tea with him. I saw him a few days before he was arrested. People that he was fortunate to have documented all those lay people, or Fatima Mir were part of those groups, or Cyril, or Peter Jones were there. And our Prof Herine Ngwenkulu, I understand today they're having also their own talk in UNISA together with Matata Tsetu. They are there. So they are part of that book as well. So there's a lot that we can hear about the life of Steve Biko and the Black consciousness programs that were taking place that time. That was the work of Prof Bennie Khoapa. Over to you, Doc.
Thank you so much, Nobuto. Nobuto Mbecheni is her surname. She has been introducing all of us. No one has been talking about her. She's a wonderful young woman who holds a serious university degree, BCom honors. She is an internationalist because she attended varsities here in the country and also in Côte d'Ivoire. She speaks perfect French. She's a mother, she's got 2 kids, and guess what? Her daughter has just passed BA Law at Wits University. She's now into LLB. So thank you, Nobuto. She is an organizing leader. She has put all this together for us. If you notice the people she keeps mentioning, we have made a decision that we will not only talk about organizations that were banned, but we should also mention the people who built those organizations. Lest we forget that things are done by human beings. So it is possible to do them. We lived with these people, and it is them that we should honor, we should remember, and we should emulate. It's not a dead history. There were curtains here. There was somebody who created those curtains. So we need to go to the persons because we seek to rebuild and recreate ourselves. Why are we doing this again? We want to talk to our minds. We want to feed an imagination so that people can begin, as the earlier speakers were saying, to engage with their own affairs. Mamsi was saying that leave other people to do things, but there are all your own responsibilities. But how will you know what to do? You have to find time. You have to make a decision, an internal decision, that I have to do things by myself. And if there's any destiny you want to build, you have to build first the capacity to recreate yourself. You are what you are. You can be what you want to be because of what you have to do. So that's the reason why we hold this event. We don't hold it because it's a date in the calendar. We hold it because here's an opportunity to reflect, to look at ourselves and at our responsibilities. I want to share, Mamsi, a moment with your father. Pick up one moment. I had to drag him out of retirement in 2012. I had just launched that biography I wrote, the brown cover book on Biko. And it was invited by UNISA. So we went over there 2011 to launch the book. And as a result of the success of that event, the university asked me to continue to do a Biko event in 2012. So I was given an office and a latitude to decide who can come and how the event can be shaped. So I said, that's my chance now to go and pick up my old man, Ompen. So he was reluctant, he didn't want to come. He said, I'm relaxed, I'm at home, I'm not doing any of this thing. In fact, what is it to say about Biko? I said, oh, please come, man. You are the elder, you know better. So just come and share with us your moments with the man. So it was arranged. He was flown into Pretoria. And then this particular morning, we went to fetch him from the hotel. Myself, Opangwenya, A.B. Makwe, and Reverend Ram Khoapa. So we are seated at the foyer. He comes out wearing a blue top, very beautiful. And he's carrying a file, almost with a matching color with his top. And he walks towards us. You know your father. So he greets and we hug. And then he shows us this file. He says, here are the speeches that I've been doing of this chat. What else is there to say? Now then we were stunned. What else is there to say? You know? So it was a bit quiet, and somebody decided to carry the conversation on something else. So that sort of disappeared. And then we drove to the venue at UNISA. It's Khorong building. We got there, we were received, put in a holding room, and then the event started. Professor Tinyiko Maluleke was the MC. So he called Professor Khoapa over to the podium. And so he comes and he's carrying this file again. And I'm not expecting anything odd. But when he gets on the podium, he raises his arm and says, here are the speeches that I've been making over this chap. What else is there to say? Didn't I want to disappear? How can I do this to the university? Bring somebody who has nothing to say. So it was quiet. Then he started to make jokes, and then which broke the tension. And he said one thing. We need to relook at how we remember Biko. We need a new mandate. He told us about the work that they had been doing when he was in the United States, when he was leading the Black Consciousness Movement of Azania, PCMA, the US chapter, that what the topics that Biko wrote about, the issues that he was engaged in, need to be expanded. We need to carry them further. that became a big issue in me over the years since 2012. And that's why we had decided, this has to be done differently. We can't keep doing it in the older way. And there has to be a space where we can look back and say, this is how far Biko and Khoapa had gone. This is where we think we can take it now. So this very meeting, its organization was inspired by your father in a small, short, punchy address he did in 2012. My talk has to do with the fashionable 30 years. Throughout the years, South Africa has been talking about 30 years of democracy. And I want us to interrogate the 30 years. My contribution is it not 30 years of inferiority complex? We're going to look at what cost was this 30 years on us as citizens. We are trying to define inferiority complex, but not in a dictionary way or academic way. But we're going to go into inferiority complex by looking at this partnership of Biko and Khoapa. And we are going to go to personal attributes of the two personalities. A few weeks ago, I accompanied a mentor and an old teacher of mine, Professor Peter Mtuze, and he made a talk, which was a brief version of his life. And he couched his life battles as wars, because he was part of the ANC Youth League in the 50s, and he missed out when many of his friends were going to exile. He wouldn't go to exile because his family was looking up to him. He was the only child who would have changed the life of the family. But throughout the years, since not going into exile with his fellow comrades, he had to be at the cold face of many battles. And so in his speech, he had something like 8 Peter Mtuze wars. Now, I want to take cue from Professor Mtuze and bring what I think are 7 personal attributes of Biko and Khoapa. The first personal attribute is faith. What I see of the two men was that anything that they sought to put their mind and effort and do, they had faith in what they do. Faith, not in the sense of religion, as in Christianity, but faith in the sense that I don't doubt what I'm about to do, that I am ready to overcome any hurdle between myself and what I have to do. That's the kind of faith I see between the two men. The second personal attribute is that of individual strength. Even if we exist as a group, and we believe that we are powerful when we are a group, if we don't have individual strength, then that group is weak. It may be big in numbers, but the strength begins with the individual. For all these years I've been involved in the BCM, we are talking about dignity. We had never spoken about individual strength, because the whole dignity, the whole strength begins with the person. So Mamsi was telling us about how the police were harassing, they are disturbing your lives. And there was no Biko in that house. There was your father, your mother, and yourselves. And he stood the harshness on his own. He wouldn't say, you have to fight where to that individual strength. The third personal attribute is the sense of integrity. for you to have dignity, for you to be able to express yourself and not parrot and not be. I have a writer I favor so much, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who amongst his book wrote a novel called The Wizard of the Crow. It took 20 years to write that novel. And in the novel, he depicts a story in a fictitious land with a fictitious ruler. And he talks about the habit of those who are around the ruler, who will always do everything that the ruler does. And this is what I see even in South African government. You go to a government event, they want to talk like Mandela, or they want to talk like Ramaphosa, and there's something like protocol observed. I don't know, you don't know protocol, whether she's hiding somewhere or she's the promoter of some people, male or female, but they actually do so, they are so theatrical, you know, and I get to enjoy myself. They just behave like parrots. Now, if you are a parrot, Ngugi says that you would have gone through the course called parrotology, the study of becoming a parrot. So when you decide to behave that way, you are hiding your true self. You are not allowing yourself to play out. So life becomes boring. Life cannot change. We cannot become better when everybody seeks to parrot and parrot and parrot. So when I say that there's a sense of integrity, there's the being that Sam talked about. So we need each other because we are beings, different beings, but who are broadly in some kind of direction. The fourth personal attribute is the sense of action. They talk, they have generated strength, but their talk doesn't end at the talk. It translates into actions. And these portraits, as Nobuto was telling us, it's the evidence of action. You can touch that building. This is what this man did. And in action, in making action, there's something that is so demanded of any person who is to take initiative. It is to know that you have to start what was never done. People shy away because they don't want to start. They believe that somebody else has to start something. So what you see in this action is the power to start. You initiate. You overcome any fear or being ashamed that I don't have to be in the front. I have to start something. The sense of action. Number 5, sense of identity. Many of these things would have not happened if you don't have a balance on yourself, knowing who you are, as Umamsi was telling us earlier. Every human being has to transcend him or herself. You have to rise to some kind of level for certain responsibilities. There are things that are demanding your deliberate growth by mind and by all spirits. So what I see, there's a power between these two comrades. Power to transcend and to be ready to be doing bigger things. Let me talk more about transcending. I lost my mother in 1970, Mamsi. I was 4 years old then. She died, I have a recollection of the funeral, the day of the funeral, but I was advised, it was explained to me she had a stomach problem, and that led to her death. Many years down the line, I think I was already over 50 when I got the truth. From some fellow who knew something, and at the time he was so drunk, he said, I know you're the son of that lady who died in a toilet after an abortion. Do you have 10 rand there for me? Good enough, I had a 10 rand in my pocket, I gave him 10 rand. So I drove away, I stopped somewhere, and then I started to cry. I was over 50. Here was the truth brought to me in the manner it did. But then what do I do? Do I cry? What do I do? I collapse myself. No, I was handed over to a grandmother who mothered me, who did a great job. Shouldn't I be thankful that I was given life? She gave birth to me. She may have been confronted by certain circumstances which led her not to need that pregnancy, perhaps, and this time around, it may have overcome her life. Shouldn't I take joy at living and at the love of being born? So this is how you transcend. You move from one plane to the other because there is work to do. There is life to enjoy. There is life to build. There are things to create. So this is what I see in Biko. I can also bring in Professor Mtuze, who grew up in a farm laborer situations. His parents were farm laborers in a white farm setup. It's the most lowest station that you may find our people. So he couldn't have the advantage of learned parents who will know the date of his birth, who will know, who will be able to give him a Christian name acceptable in schools and the places of work. So he had the fortune of finding other people who would guess his age. So he was given a date, 2nd November 1941, by a priest. And somebody else said, your name is Peter, because we have to have a Christian name here. But then, as Professor Mtuze would say, being the first black professor to come out of Rhodes University, says, I'm a professor, although I don't know the date of my birth. And in fact, I'm the first professor who does not know the date of his birth. Why? Because instead, he loves that his parents gave birth to him. So you transcend the limitations, the marginalizations, all these small things that seek to bottle you, you transcend and become beyond. That's what we mean when we say these two gentlemen were sharing this theme. The seventh personal attribute I'd like to share is the sense of possibility. When they lived together, there would have been no Andile, M-Afrika. In fact, I was born the year he came to University Biko. So, how could it be that now I get to come around, but I get to meet the entire heritage, the entire beauty, the entire movement that has been built over the time and effort by these two men. So what they were doing was going to live beyond them. And now that we know, we just buried Ompen in May this year, wherever he rests, there we are so enriched by their lives. The sense of possibility, the things you do that will now live beyond you. From the personal attributes, I'd like to just briefly touch on the facets of inferiority complex, where we can be able to see this thing called the smallness, the feeling of being small, inferiority complex. One, internalized negative beliefs. When everything that is so bad spoken to you or that is made known to you, and when you keep it internally in you and you drive your life with all of these kind of fears, that you are small, that you are insignificant, and you always have a doubt in anything that you think you can do. You are so skeptical, and I can't go, I'm going. And sometimes you are afraid to be ashamed by others. Inferiority complex is contagious. It's like a disease. If I am afraid, I'm going to seek to make Nobuto to be afraid too. And I'm going to be making a warning, don't do that. Keep back, don't go forward. We are afraid of the world, yet we are very aggressive to others who are comfortable with the world. Noboto could be just moving around. Now I'm scared of the world because I hold inferiority complex, and I try to warn Noboto, no, and I do it very aggressively towards her, yet I hold fears of the world. She's just born, she's just around, and she fears nothing. Inferiority complex tells you that you have no right to think. The biggest thing in this country has been that leaders in political parties and in government are going to think on our behalf. And they do so. They tell us. Ramaphosa came out in the inauguration speech saying, the people have spoken. Where was that meeting? When people refused to go and vote for the ANC. So they lose the votes, and then they turn around to say, no, this was just a language, this was a message from the people. If you shy away from what you have to do and leave that right for others to think on your behalf, then you will always remain a non-starter. You will always remain a victim of inferiority. Kwame Ture, Stockley Carmichael, was visiting this town in 1997, and he warned this country. He said, do not allow your leaders to think on your behalf. You have to think with your leaders. It is possible to think together. We shouldn't take ourselves out of the thinking room. We should be right there in the thinking room. There are others, there are many out there, and we have seen them so much during this year's election. There were more parties, people believed that they can become leaders. What do we say? When are we leading ourselves? Why should we trust others to lead us? And that's what you were dealing with, Mamsi, earlier. So in other words, the 30 years that is now branded as the 30 years of democracy is the 30 years, for me, of inferiority complex. We are where we are, not because of Zuma, not because of ANC, but just because of us, of what we have brought upon ourselves in the last 30 years. It's all in the mind. What these two gentlemen were doing, they were seeking to reach our mind, seeking to persuade us so that through our own minds, we can improve ourselves, we can lift ourselves. But did we listen to Biko and to Khoapa? This year, we count 47 years since the death of Biko. We're going to count more years since the death of Khoapa. But are we listening to them? And what is the cost of not listening? Our own children. Mambonga was telling me her own grandchildren are already confronting her. They are going to say, if you say you were in a struggle, why is the country where it is if you were in a struggle? Why are we in this position? What did you do? Did you look away? That's what our children are going to do to us. Let me round up Nobuto and complete my contribution. It is us who sold the destiny of our children and grandchildren. It is not Zuma, as everybody would like to say. It is not the ANC or the political parties that are having a nice time today. It is us. We chose not to listen to Biko and to Khoapa. The time to change our ways is now. We are an embarrassment to the world that supported our fight against whites who occupied our land with violence. We're an embarrassment to our children. We lie that we were in struggle, yet we were sleepwalking. It is time to repent. Thank you so much.
Can you please give a round of applause today? It was a very powerful talk. Reflecting on this day, this very sad day, and the inferiority complex, that maybe we can ask ourselves, is it someone else's fault? Is it our fault? What are we doing or saying about that? Anyone from the audience at this moment that just wants to share anything about today and the celebrations? I don't want to. There's a roving mic. Can you take it to Mamu? Okay. Yeah.
I don't know whether it's morning or afternoon myself, but I will say greetings to everybody. I need first to apologize for not being early, but well, I think I suspect I actually did get the gist of the day today. Whoever was behind the thinking of realizing this day, I have to thank him or her. You know, I won't say on behalf of the community, but I will say on behalf of most of the people I've met in my world, in the struggle, politically or otherwise. And there are so many that has been said, from Sam first, I think, and then from you, Mapsi, I think, and Andile. I've been trying to collect threads, and I said to myself, hey, this thing of not having, you know, technology, what, because now I would have been able to say, tick there, and know exactly what it is that I need to talk about. But I collected some stuff. First and foremost, I think from Sam, I got the idea of being the father figure in our lives. And you too, Marcy. The roles that our parents and our fathers played in us, and strange enough, as girls, and then as women. I was brought up by a very, very strict father. Very, very conservative. And I used to sometimes feel this man is being unfair. And we were 3 to 4 girls. But when you look at the foundation, conservative as our fathers were, that they gave us, we actually sometimes sit and think that what happened to the fathers of today? Did they have the examples that we had? Or was it lacking in their lives? I was speaking to someone, I always speak about this to most people that I meet in Ginsberg and say, it's amazing sometimes when I look at what is happening in my own community when it comes to men. Maybe I'm speaking too much for the men because of the father figure that I had. Because when we grew up, with that rickety bridge that was there, as kids, we used to come back from school, especially Fridays, and stand this side of the river as children. Either we're swimming or something. And most men would be coming from town, from work, the factories, wherever they were working, and give us sweets and other stuff, you know. It was so nice, as little girls, looking at these men, admiring us as children. That is the power that men had in those days. They were fathers, they were homekeepers, they were home providers. They were proud of being the men they were in my community here. in Ginsberg. During the day, you never even see a man here. Because it's either it's a teacher or a school board secretary, but most of the time, the men were at work. The men were home providers. The men were home leaders. The men were there to look after the little girls. Not to rape them, not to abuse them, not to abuse the women as well. And today we're talking of GBV. I am amazed at the standards, or what you say as inferiority complex, the things that we've accepted as if it's normal. When we are not looking at the reasons for this kind of behavior from the men. What is happening to the mindsets of the men in power who are not even thinking about the other men in our communities? And we stand and condemn them all the time, but not looking from the back where we come from. What happened to the caliber of men that our parents were? And I don't want to believe there were no single parents at the time, because there were. But what were the values and the standards that they were bringing up their children? Because they respected their mothers. They're not raping their sisters. What happened to those men? Because the situation and the standards that we're living by now actually give the inferiority complex to the men, and they accept it. But what is it that we are doing as a community to bring the men's dignity back? I fail to understand the kind of society we've become. Because whichever way we look at it, it has always been a patriarchal society from the biblical times. I won't go back there. But I look at my own brothers. From my brothers, I look at my own sons. Because for my son to be a man tomorrow, he has to come from a home that is not exactly similar to the way I was brought up, but to a home that gives him the same values I was brought up in. Being a single parent. So you can, I'm just addressing the issue of the inferiority complex and Mamsi that we're talking about. What happens to these men? I've been serving this community for a long time, first as an activist for HIV, and then I became clinic chairperson and volunteer. Then I became chairperson of the 7 clinics of the Buffalo City at the time. No, it was Kingdomstown at the time, TLC. Then from there I became secretary of the Grey Hospital Board and Bishop combined. It's difficult for me to go through the stories of what you go through when the powers that be know that you have a Black consciousness background. Because you go to certain meetings where I was actually told by a chief of staff in East London Hall, Buffalo City, East London Hall, that when that lady raises up her hand, please don't give her the opportunity. She comes from Ginsberg. The Biko, she's one of the Biko followers, he put it like that. If you allow her to talk, this meeting will never come to an end, because she's going to bring up the whole Black consciousness thing, and we will lose topic of what this was all about. Because at the time, I couldn't stand the situation that was going on in our hospitals. It was driving me mad. I was just blessed with the presence of Muswale at the time, because he was the MEC for health. He asked me to go to his office one day and put my case across. And he said to me, Ms. Manu, I'm going to take your presentation as it is and use it as a provincial presentation and bring it to the attention of Aaron Mutsaledi in order to be able to come up with the policy of the formation of hospital boards. That gave me the strength to be able to move forward with most of the programs that we needed to do in both hospitals, until then we came apart again and I remained at Grey Hospital. What I'm trying to say to you is, there are times when they know who you are, they put you down simply because they know who you are and you don't change your identity. You remain who you are, you remain true to yourself, you tell yourself, I'm going to go ahead with this no matter what the case may be. I'm just giving you a short story of of my journey in the last 30 years, let me put it like that. Coming to what Nobuto was saying, I became involved in a land claims program for this community. Most of the people from this community came from town. That's a short version. And there were some elderly people before me, and we eventually became chairperson. I was assisted by Andile, by the way. And I said to him, hey, this has come to my attention, but I'm still busy with the hospital thing. Assist me here. It's been a tough journey, a very, very tough journey, and it's not yet complete. I need to be honest with you. It's been a tough journey up to today. We still have a case at the Legal Resource Center in Grahamstown. And when Ngugaitobi went on air, I think November last year, he even said, when Paul Mashatile came in, he actually informed the people at the land claims restitution offices that this thing of people wanting land and stuff will take more than 700 years for us to finish. So I just suggest you guys stop it. And I looked at the television set, I thought, no, he's making a mistake. But when I tried to follow some claims we had put in from 1998 and 2014, I was actually informed this year in March, no, we closed those in 2018. Imagine. And here we are still fighting the battle because some of the properties that the people owned in town were sold to government or to private sector without them being gazetted. So it means the owners of those properties are not even aware. And now we're busy digging it out. And do you know what is happening?
Can you wrap up this, bro?
We are not able to go through, I think, because of the history. What I'm actually coming to say to you is, when we become involved in these things, we take the step forward, but there will always be standing blocks, simply because you are known that you are somebody who comes from a black consciousness background. But at the end of the day, because of Biko and your father and the likes of them before them, we're still moving forward. Few as we are, or even if you are an individual, you still stick to the black philosophy, black consciousness philosophy. And I thank the lives of people like Biko and your father, Mohapi, Rashidi, and the rest of them. And I thank you.
Nice. The importance of this meeting, what we seek to restore or what we seek to deal with, is the corruption of the mind. People talk today about who stole what, there's corruption there, people are in positions, they're doing this and that. Do we talk about the contaminated mind, the mind that is now leaving us in the doldrums? Once they were fathers, then they were absent. I made a story about my mother. My own political genesis happened in the house of Sister Steve Biko. It's all women, and even in the organization of this women meeting, I'm the only man here. So I have so much reliance on people I think have potential, because I've known them. I was brought up by women. Then now it's worse. Men are not back, but they've become animals. Such a very pathetic situation. But a country needs an activity of reflecting by mind, questioning itself. What do we do when our minds are as corrupted? When we are as corrupted, what do we do? What is the cost of it on us and on our children? It's your time, sis.
Thank you, Sissy, for the topics you raised are actually, they're the fabrics of community, the fabrics of our lives. And one of the things that sort of got to me as you were talking, you are asking about the foundations. Where are those foundations? And I want to say the foundations are the ones that we have chosen to destroy. Because it's an act every day that we break the foundations. If I'm under the impression that to have my child be accepted at school, I will not hold them accountable when they do bad behavior, because you don't want your child to feel uncomfortable. You have parents, and I will say I'm not a parent, but I have nieces and nephews that are my children. What I'm trying to say is that if we as parents, as sisters, as aunts, as brothers, and uncles, if we are accepting and normalizing bad behavior because you don't want to have your child stand out, we are responsible for those behaviors. We are responsible for the animals. Remember, animals, we call them animals because they're kept somewhere, right? Who is feeding the animals? We are feeding the behavior. We are normalizing the behavior. So it goes back to that question of sense of integrity. Where is our integrity to say, you know what, I'd rather be single than to marry because I'm being asked, when are you getting married? I'd rather be childless when I know I am not capable to have a child. Just because I have reproductive organs does not mean I am qualified to have a child. Let's be honest about these things, guys. Not all of us are meant to be mothers in the traditional way. I can be a mother to my nieces and nephews in the role that I have defined because I know where I'm adding value. I'm not taking over my sister's role as their biological mother, but I play the role of being an extra mother. Umamncane, umamkhulu. Those are real jobs. Those are real titles. Those are real consequences in the children's lives that are around us. When we start absconding from those, and we think progress means my child doesn't know how to cook, and we think it's cute. Heck no. I have come across people who don't know how to cook, and they are proud to say, my mother never wanted me to be in the kitchen because we had a maid. The only thing that goes through my mind is if you were in my parents' household, first and foremost, there was no maid. There was Aunt Esther that you listen to. She did not do our chores. My mom used to be point blank. Oh, Aunt Esther is here to help me so that your father can go to work, not you. Get up in the morning, make your bed. Get up in the morning and go wash the dishes. If the dishes are not made, you are responsible. The fact that you can afford to have supposedly a maid, a housekeeper, and all those things, that does not take away the responsibility of teaching your children how to be human. By the time they're animals, guess what? there was a gap, there was a void that was not filled. And it's upon us. It goes back to that self. It goes back to the points Baba Andile was raising. Those attributes, they are not theoretical. They don't need money. They don't need a car. They don't need a big mansion. They don't need a title. Those are the things that we are born with. But we choose to let them go because they are not expedient for me to be a leader. They are not expedient for me to be that person. We need to get back to those roots. What you're talking about, how do you uncorrupt the mind? It starts with us understanding that we are the solution. The solution is not out there. We are the solutions in our lives, and through what we do in our lives, the children are watching. The next generation is watching. They will be asking, what did you do? Why did you allow this to happen? And I would rather be standing right next to my father and say, I did this. I did this. I took it forward. What you're talking about is taking it forward. And it's not about being in a group, like you're saying. This safety in numbers stuff, it's a detriment to us. Because, like you're saying, we are parroting bad behavior. We are parroting to be accepted for the wrong reasons. We need to come back and, if you're a man, I'm sorry, grow one. Grow a pair. If you're a woman, grow your mind. Because as a mother, you influence more people than you do sometimes as a man. Remember, you feed a girl, you build a community. But those ladies, those girls, those women, whatever word you want to call, those females cannot do it on their own. So it is not about gender fights. It's about saying we are all in this together. If you are one of those who grow up without a father present, that does not make you less of a man, less of anything. Because you have enough people in your life that you can emulate and say, I know what it is to value human beings. I know how it is to value my mom, to value my sister, to value my neighbor. I don't necessarily have to live with the father in the house, because some people can live with the father in the house and they learn nothing. But we have a choice. That's one thing God gave us. We have a choice every day we wake up in the morning. If you did bad yesterday, you have a choice today. You have a choice tomorrow. And I choose to say we can do it better. We can leave a legacy that is better than what we are currently in if we start today. And that's all it comes down to. Let's start today.
Thank you, Mrs. Pro, in sharing those stories. I can relate to the boards, the hospital boards struggles, especially with the state of our health facilities. I'm also a deputy chairperson for the board, George Hospital in the Western Cape. So I sit in those challenges. But whatever I can say, Church Hospital is better than your hospitals. Yeah, we don't get many challenges like these ones here. Thanks, Mams, for, we still have some there. Some, I think, in your closing, after Andile and Mams, do you want to just say something?
Yes, thank you. Session itself, but I'd like to say yes, that was very enlightening. Thank you to Mamsi and Andile. Very thought-provoking, very practical, and
the translation of what we believe in. And it does call for action. We can't continue having sessions where we engage on talk shows, but to get back into community would be putting into place all that the BC stalwarts, protagonists believed in. I think we need to go back to the youth. Yes, we have lessons, we have stories, but the youth play a vital part in self-reflect and to create new policies. Ours may be archaic, maybe old, we could learn from them. They are our teachers today. If we could only listen and we could only hear, they too have their own cries. The whole of society, as my son would say, we all need some kind of healing. And we need to take that healing comes from care, compassion, sensitivity, awareness, nourishing each other's beliefs, nurturing and being a little more sensitive to each other's needs. The kind of self-centeredness society that we are living in, we should try and say no more. We belong to community, and that is where we should be, and that is our starting point. I'm going to say thank you, and Nabuto, you've done a good job. Let's continue. And to the Biko Center, there is so much that's still to be done. Within Siki, I'm hoping still in the audience, and the Biko Center. Thank you for having this hosted. 47 years, bad organizations, let's not ban ourselves. The community needs us. Let's go out there and do what we have to do, whether it's in clinics, in social work organizations, youth organizations. If we go back, we've got enough material amongst us to go and do the work that we originally set out to do. Thank you. If we give the audience a chance, there are people who are wanting to speak. I've seen some hands up.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Before Dice is a local, can you accept the audience then? There are hands there. Okay, Nirvana, you can go on.
Well, very afternoon, everyone. A most enlightening discussion and engagements that we've put through. And like my mother has led in terms of alluding to the engagements that I believe that needs to happen within our society, starts from structuring a healing program. I think what South Africa has ended up doing and why we are in the space that we're in of inferiority is because we have not taken the time as a collective community, as a collective South Africa, to understand healing, to understanding ourselves, to repositioning and redefining how we see ourselves, to eradicate this concept of, or this living lifestyle of inferiority. There are many spaces in all of our communities that has become more exacerbated to allow this negative power of inferiority to consume our society. And I think what we need to clinically look at is how do we heal? How do we correct this malaise of, I would say, psychological, because that's what it actually has been. It's a psychological warfare. We talked about warring instances in people's lives against the state. You've heard of currently the mum and our sister and our aunt who talks about Black consciousness people being isolated and attacked for their belief systems and being marginalized out of society. And this, I believe, the corrective action framework should be that of healing. And the ultimate, for me right now, the original sin that lives is that of how we have defined ourselves in this false narrative of racism. And the Black consciousness, in its ethos, in its conceptualization, in its formation, in its existence, in its programs, in all of that, is a singular way of eradicating this original sin of racism. For us to show South Africa that there is only one race, and the human race. No other adjective should be applied. When you speak to many people in different forms of society, and you say that you are Black consciousness, there's this fear, this old World War II, World War I creative way of creating fear through the word Black. And we need to show them the power that Black actually, and what does it mean. And when you actually sit down individually with people and they see it and they concretize what that actually means, they find that the institution of the past misled them, gave them the wrong information, gave them the wrong tools to construct their powers of discrimination and institutional frameworks that they have permeated and created this false narrative. So we need to start correcting that. And for me, my only parting advice, knowledge transference would be, let's create a healing program. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Nyameko. What does it look like? Nyameko, you just provoked me. I want to read a poem that was written by your father, Strini Moodley. There's no meeting of Biko and Khoapa without Strini and without poetry. This poem appeared in the Sasso newsletter that your father used to be an editor of. And it reads, Revolution in Conception. I watch the evolving me change, the slow development. My birth has come in my life, and so will my death. Slowly, my soul moves towards the mapped out destiny, and smiling, it advances, joyous in spirit, firm in purpose, and the definite promise of a new tomorrow. My other poem for this event also appears in this compilation on Sasso, and it reads, where the mind is without fear, and the herd is held high, where knowledge is free, where words come out from the depth of truth, in that heaven of freedom, my father, Professor Khoapa, let my Azania awake.
Thank you, Nyameko. It's not written Nyameko there. Another name is written.
Okay.
But it's a nice name, Nyameko. Thank you very much for that contribution. When I spoke of boards, as Sisbro was talking, it warms my heart as we are closing. We are closing now. After me, there will be no one who's going to talk. There's a hand.
Thank you. Thank you, Program Director. Good afternoon, everybody. I just can't sit down and not say thank you to these organizers of this occasion. It's a pity, Andile and Nobuto, that we were this number. I was expecting that community would be here to come and listen to themselves, to what is going to be said here. I just want to talk about Braben. Braben, I've known him since 70s, when we were in Devon. I always say when I talk about him that he's the first employer of Steve. Steve will never be employed anyway by any white man or any black person because of his political ideology. But Braben, we managed to have food on the table through Braben because he started working for the black community programs at Beatrice Street in Devon. We've respected that guy. We are still respecting Braben for that. It's just a pity, Mamsi, I was not able to attend the funeral, but Nkosinathi was there, at least to represent the family. And we used your father a lot, even in the foundation and the center, because of the experience that he has for programs. I just want to thank you very much for organizing this program. And one thing that is touching me is those pictures there. All those pictures, Andile, that are standing there, I know about them. The worst one now that is still there in the building is the Zanempilo Clinic. And people always criticize the family for not taking care of Zanempilo. Zanempilo was taken over by the then government of Sabe and went on to this recent government. So we had no control over it, although we wanted to take it over, but we were not allowed to. And as a result, it's in that condition, and whenever there are going to be visitors, we will run there, and or I phone the minister, the MEC who is there, to say there are guests who are coming, and they would like to visit Zanempilo. So I don't know how, or probably can help us, guys. How can we get those buildings back? Because today there's so much unemployment, and yet there's employment there. You know, we used to wear shoes, belts, bags, and everything that were done at Nzwaka. So today it's just buildings that are not there. So I would like to have a meeting with the new minister of whatever to check if there's anything that they can do, or is it because they dismiss anything that has got black consciousness, and yet it's what people would like to have. So I want to thank you guys, and it's so nice to listen to young people, you know, talking like this, and we see the way through you, and I hope you'll continue. Whether you are being criticized or whatever, but just continue with the good work that we are doing. Thank you, Mamsi. Thank you, Mamsi. Mom, Mamsi and her siblings were very young. I know Paraben and Mam Nona, we used to go to that house, and when we get there, you know, a lot of people. So Mam Nona would have to sit with that we eat. So I want to thank the Khoapa family. And I did work again with Prof Ben in another organization, the UMTAP. He was chaired. So I want to thank you very much, guys. Keep on doing this good work.
Sorry, can I break your the only reason why I'm saying this is because I want it to be minuted. I'm hoping that there want to be minutes or some type of record of this, because I want to sort of put certain institutions on call. Ma, what you're talking about, Zanempilo, for instance, as a clinic, we are aware of a lot of funding when it comes to health facilities. Even doctors around the world can come and facilitate and be in such institutions. And I'm not talking about Cuba, because that's probably where people's minds are going to go to. I'm talking about non-profit organizations that would be willing to actually come and help facilitate. However, I'm going to talk from an experience. In Andile, Khoapa, there is a building that was built by the Red Cross. It is sitting, deteriorating. With my dad, my sisters, we created an organization called the KLCT, where we're trying to almost like mimic what BCP was about, to say, because that model works. The BCP model works every time, everywhere, but it has to be allowed room to grow. The red tape of government and people's egos have to get out of the way. That building, and I'm talking about an ego, the ego of my family. I'm not talking about some arbitrary numbers and people's names out there. I'm talking about my own family. Instead of supporting the initiative, we had a container that was going to come. There's an organization called MedShare. It's based in the US in Atlanta. It gives you not only the equipment, it will fund you from the carpet all the way to the syringe. It will even help you get doctors. Do you know how many doctors and medical students are floating all over the world looking for an internship just to come for 6 months? What we can do with a doctor for 6 months, and they have a rotation of sorts, and there's nothing to do with government giving you anything except government signing a bill of lading to say, as a government, we will accept those donations for that organization. That's all it is. It's not putting them on the map. The Red Cross building sits today because someone somewhere within my own family, as the royal family, decided there wasn't enough something for me. We need to get out of our own ways, people, seriously. So all of the things that we are talking about, we are looking for. So I'm making the name MedShare one of the organizations that if there is a real call for action, we need the health, what are they called, MECs? I always get the protocols confused. There are DDGs and there are MECs and all those things. But whoever that person is, who can be able to sign off because that's all they're looking for. They raise the funds for your container to be shipped. But we are sitting here with kids starving. We are sitting here with people in ill health. We are sitting here with climate changes that are causing things like cholera. Guys, cholera is back. Who would have thought? So we need to figure out, and I try to figure out how government works, to be honest. I studied public policy, but not the way we apply it in this country. We are getting our own families sick. We are getting our own communities sick in the name of leadership or in the name of parroting certain protocols. They don't make any sense. So I want to continue that dialogue, ma'am, with Zanempilo, because Zanempilo is not the only one. Remember, there's Isolempilo in Adams that disappeared into thin air, with Oxfam having actually given the full container for all the equipment, from X-rays all the way down. It got confiscated by the government. And so that question is still standing for me. Where are all the assets that BCP had? I'm talking about assets, I'm talking about equipment, I'm talking about cars, vans, salaries. There was actual cash flow. And I'm not talking about small cents, because I don't know if people are aware of this, BCP actually was the highest paying organization to their staff. It was not comparable to anything that someone else was being paid in South Africa. And I'm talking about across all gender. I'm talking about all races. They paid well because they knew how to write proposals. Heck, they knew how to write proposals, which means they were able to create a cash flow that was not taxed by this government, and that government at the time. It came as that value. So there are assets that are still sitting out there, theoretically. So we're talking about reparations, we're talking about getting people's monies back, because that money can be plowed back into community developments for each and every community that the BCP had a footprint in. So those for me are the conversations I'm curious about. Those are the organizations that for me they have nothing to do with politics, but have a lot more to do with us getting ourselves moving again and re-evaluating our minds. Are we going to get stuck because you don't vote for this organization, you vote for that organization, you sit in this city, you don't sit in that city? It's too late for that, guys. We are one people.
Thank you, Mums. And we're hoping that we continue that conversation out after this. That was, before Mums, it was Mamu Biko who contributed. And I'm happy that you also mentioned about the foundation, because as I was starting to say, when we talk of boards, it warms my heart to know that of all the unsung heroes we have in this country, Prof Ben was honored by the foundation. He was part of the board of the foundation, so he has always been honored by the family as well. When we honor the names, the last one to honor, it will be, when now we talk of the journalists, when I opened, I said journalist media houses were banned on that day. People were detained. But just to honor this one last elder man, Utata James Matthews, who died at 95, was an author, and his work was always banished and could not get out there. He was detained a number of times. Also has a poem that he wrote that was called Steve is Dead. So as I now thank everyone who came here, the families that are here to support us, the kids there. I see people coming in. They saw I think the fortunate part was that it started drizzling in the morning, and I'm sure people decided not to come, but we have this audience that I've been managing here online, on Facebook as well, that the comments will be shared with the Institute. People have been writing there on that Facebook page what they were thinking about this day and the actual event. I'm going to, do you have, Bruce, is that a hand? Oh, okay. I don't think it's a hand. Oh, I also, when Doc introduced me, he forgot to say that I'm also a poet.
Yeah.
She's a
writer. She's a writer.
I write poems and I write stories. I have stories that I'm writing about Ginsberg.
Yes.
A book that is not finished. It's titled "They Were There." So it's going to be appealing to everyone, even in the country, to share stories about people who were there, who made impact in your lives. We all have those stories. So we are going to open something that everyone can just hold a story there. Then we can publish that. But it should start with my stories from Ginsberg. So you watch the space, your names, you'll see your character, but the name will be different, and you can tell this is so-and-so, I know this person, but I'll be writing those stories. After I read this poem, it will be the end. I will not want to contaminate it, because I'll just read the poem, and then we have thanked everyone, and the meeting will be adjourned. The poem is in Xhosa. It's about Prof Ben. I wrote it while I was sitting here trying to, from the discussions. It's not a praise, so you'll excuse if it's not up to good standard, but it's something, I don't just write poems, something must move me. If Doc had asked me to write it before the session, I would have written it. There should be something, so maybe to stop it. It goes like this. The title of the poem is Dingunjinga Lwazi Omnyama. Ihlohlile yafundisa eGirls Park, yaqeqesha eAdams College, yakhupha unontlalontle, iYanof Meyer School, ndingunontlalo-ntle. Imithandazo ivakele amaphupha afeziwe. Usapho lwakwaRhoapa lunonontlalo-ntle, mamnona nosapho bayahlutha, hayi mna ndilithandazwe. Basebenza ubunontlalo-ntle kobo buthandazwe. Zasekwiinkqubo zokuphuhlisa uluntu olumnyama, kwasetyenzwa wafunda umntu omnyama, ndingunontlalo-ntle. Yaphuhlisa izanempilo iphilisa, yasebenza injwaxu iveza imali namafele, ndingunontlalo-ntle, ndilithandazwe. Afika amabhulu atshabalilisa konke, abhangisa abulala, wabhaca unontlalo-ntle, ndilithandazwe. Akayekanga uthe kude nekhaya, wafunda, wayityekeza, ndingunjingalwazi omnyama. Wabuyela ekhaya waqhubeka apho ebeke khona, ephuhlisa imfundo yabantwana boMzantsi Afrika, wazibonakalisa kwaSomgxada eFort Hare, wakhokela eNatal Technikon, yazala iDyunivesithi yaKwaZulu-Natal ngemisebenzi yakhe, ndingunjingalwazi omnyama.
Wow. That's what we do.
I want to come. I want to share it with my mom and my siblings. Thank you so much.
Tabule.
Adjourned.
Danko.